Welcome to Comics, Games, and Collectibles, your zen of geekism. We carry comics old and new, magazines, toys, games like Pokemon, Magic, D&D. Want Godzilla, Ultraman, Star Trek, Ninja Turtles, Funko Pops? You'll find it all here. Shop our Cosmic Sound Room and pick up a record or two. Enjoy our Comic Coffee Lounge with a cup of Sasquatch coffee while geeking out over a super cool movie on our big screen. Cosmic Comic, Games, and Collectibles. Superman loves us, and so will you.
Hi everyone, Jason Hunt here, inviting you to join us every Saturday morning for news. The week's headlines in science fiction, fantasy, horror, comic books, video games, plus Comic-Con updates and the weather, and the occasional interview along the way. We call it Good Morning Multiverse. We hope you join us every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 Central, right here on Sci-Fi for Me TV.
America's southern border has become a war zone. Human traffickers, drug smugglers, and terrorists flow across the Rio Grande with impunity, secure in the knowledge that no one will stop them. A distant federal government lectures Americans on their privilege while punishing overworked Border Patrol agents who were helpless to stem the tidal wave of invaders and determined migrants. Second-generation Cuban-American Marcos Zamora is a military vet, more patriotic than most Americans. No longer able to ignore the chaos at his doorstep, he acts. Joined by his best friend Gus, they hit the border every night, saving lives while stopping violent drug cartels and other opportunists. The government reacts with fury at Marcos' attempts to preserve American sovereignty, deploying the full might of their enforcement agencies. But Marcos understands that the only thing the rich and powerful fear is bad publicity, and he records every encounter. Whoever he is, this private American must be stopped. Illustrated by Richard Bonk and written by Eisner winner Mike Barron, Private American is his version of Captain America, and maybe a little Punisher, taking part in this ongoing, violent, and very real battle of good versus evil in the war for American sovereignty. Grab your copy at theprivateamerican.com.
We have a secure border, and that is a priority for our administration.
Your favorite podcast is Critical Blast.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Randy Zimmerman.
Hey, I'm in a funny book. Look at
Yeah, see you in the funny pages, right?
Hey.
I love what StreamYard allows me to do when I actually have the initiative to do some of it. I'm a lazy person by nature, so
I need to figure out how to do this for Sunday Funnies.
I'd be happy to help you. It's you have a lot more guests than I have for a show. I mean, I've got this one set up for 2, and this will look kind of weird, but you'll get the idea. I've got another one set up for when I have 5 guests. Looks just like that.
Cool. Yeah.
So, it's an overlay. It's not a background. It might be better as a background.
Oh, you must have gone through and measured all of that out. And
I did. I took a screenshot
that's
with
amazing.
the right number squares and I put it in PowerPoint. Yeah.
Good on you. Yeah, that's cool. That's sweet. See, you got Herbie there and all sorts of stuff. Yeah.
Awesome. Herbie Popnecker. You're the first person I've actually encountered who called him out by name. The Fat Fury.
Some strips, some of these. I love comics history anyway, but Herbie, yeah. I ran across a Herbie archive at a book warehouse.
Oh my god!
That Dark Horse kicked out. Yeah, that I couldn't help but buy. Sweet.
I learned about all this stuff in the 80s.
6 issues in it. Yeah. So many great characters just buried in time. So I have a copy of Fat Man, the Human Flying Saucer on my spiral rack. I need to get a copy of Herbie. I really do.
Absolutely. I learned about Herbie from the CBG, Don and Maggie Thompson.
Oh yeah, hot stuff up there. Yeah, that CBG and Hembeck. That's how I learned where a lot of characters were. And I picked up a lot of old books like All in Color for a Dime and the Comic Book.
I have that.
They have Don Thompson and
Lupinoff.
I want to say Lupoff. Yeah, Rick Lupoff. I got the book around here somewhere.
I've got the pocket sized guide that's all brown edge paper and
Richard.
Yeah, that's what I got.
Dick. Yeah, my corner is gone, and I've got my address from my old Montrose address still written in it.
If lost, please return to.
Yeah. Where I haven't lived in a couple of decades. Richard A. Lupoff and Don Thompson, 1970. Yeah,
that was a great book.
Yeah,
All in Color for a Dime.
That's how I found out about Super Snipe.
Now I know that name, but I don't know why.
Let me pull up that cover. Right there.
Yeah.
Super Snipe. As a kid who imagined he was a big superhero, all of his adventures there, he's about to stick a pin into a good old Adolf there.
Yeah. See, him seeing himself as him seeing himself as a hero in the mirror, a bigger than life hero.
Yeah.
There's echoes of that if you've ever seen it, and I'm sure you have. The William Dozier treatment for Wonder Woman.
No.
You haven't seen that?
No, it was going to be the a TV show back with Batman and Green Hornet. I know he did a Dick Tracy. I know he did I think he did a pilot for Batgirl at one point too.
He did.
I didn't know he was working on a Wonder Woman.
I've seen the pilot for Batgirl. It is on not YouTube, but that other video place that everybody puts stuff that gets struck a lot less.
The one that rhymes with Mumble?
No, not that one.
Not that one. The other
Daily
one.
Motion.
Daily Motion?
Yeah, there's the Batgirl pilots there. It's real short. It was Batman and Robin in it, and it was slightly different change of costume.
I
Her
gotta write
headquarters
that
was there
down.
in the library. It was fun. It was
That was long before the Denise Crosby Wonder Woman
yes,
too, wasn't
yes,
it?
it
Yeah.
was, and he was doing the whole camp thing that he did with Batman, wherein Diana was not the raving beauty. She was more plain looking,
Okay.
and lived with her mother, who was always, saying, don't go out in the rain like that. You're going to catch your death of cold. And
Funny.
she's like, but Steve needs me. And she transforms to Wonder Woman. And then she spends all this time in front of the mirror. And the woman in the mirror, it's a Patty Duke kind of thing.
Mhm.
Woman in the mirror is gorgeous,
Okay.
wearing a Wonder Woman costume. And, she really thinks that she's this gorgeous creature when she's dressed up as Wonder Woman. And she's not. I don't know if that was
Okay.
going to be the whole joke of it was, I'm in love with Steve, and Steve's like, yeah, thanks. Maybe some other time.
Exactly. Well, not today. I got to do. Yeah.
One I haven't seen though that was on TV, and I've always wanted to. I wanted to see the Green Hornet series.
You've never watched a Green Hornet?
I never watched an episode of the Green Hornet other than the Batman crossover.
Snoop around on YouTube. They're probably.
I'll have to, but I'd really rather buy it on DVD as a set, but I don't think anybody's officially released it.
I don't know. If not, they should have. Just for Bruce Lee alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I listened to all the radio dramas on Sirius XM, and it's funny because there was an episode of the Green Hornet that came out the day after Pearl Harbor, and it was in that episode that they did a race swap on Kato. He went from being his Japanese valet to being his Filipino valet.
There you go. Yeah. All right. It's a quick change-o. Presto change-o.
Absolutely. But
yeah.
I did get to meet Van Williams. In fact, I got his autographed picture right above my door up there.
Sweet. That's cool.
He was at Chicago Comic-Con, and he was telling Bruce Lee stories, and he talked about, of course, the Batman crossover, and how Burt Ward, of course, did all his own stunts in the show. When he's crawling over an alligator pit, he's crawling over an alligator pit, and he's supposed to fight Bruce Lee, and they'd call for action, and Bruce would get this, business look on him in advance, and Burt would back off and say, call him off, because he knew he was about to get his ass really handed to him.
Yeah.
Oh, but you've been in this comics game for a while. Was this your first calling?
Few days. Yeah. Yes, it was, really. I got a book from my uncle when I was 8 years old, and I grew up in a very restrictive religious household, and they didn't allow us to have. We were poor. Didn't allow us to have a lot, and we got TV, of course, but we were, pretty well watched over. Comics for me were anything but superheroes when I was growing up for a long time, because they thought superheroes were too violent, and look at what they turned into, after that. But I convinced them to allow me to buy Strange Adventures, which had Adam Strange reprints running in it at the time, because I convinced my mom that it was a spaceman and that was a spacesuit, not a superhero outfit.
Well, you were right, though.
And that he solved all of his problems with his brain and not his fists. So that was okay. Magnus was almost okay. She didn't see Magnus as a superhero character. My mom was the great, the final word and all that. But I had my butt whipped really bad because I smuggled a Dick Sprang Batman Giant into the house.
Oh,
Got
worth it?
Yeah, I still wish I had a copy of it. But
we had somebody in the chat there, but he disappeared. I was going to pop Pops in there. Pops had popped in. We are, of course, expecting Rob Davis to show up tonight. He's running a little late. We're hoping he's okay.
And he was the more handsome one on your card too.
I had an idea in mind for that whole thing, but then when I'm the guy who's having to do the art, it comes out the way it comes out.
I thought it looked great. Don't. That's the thinnest I've looked in years. That's cool.
Everybody ended up looking like a bobblehead on it.
That's fine. I thought it was hilarious. I thought it was just fantastic. So, and this especially, this so fits. Like I said, I need to figure out how to, now that you've told me how to do it, I'll need to figure this out for Sunday Funnies. Maybe keep my guests
you have
down
five
to
guests?
3. Huh?
You have 5 guests on Sunday Funnies, or
I have whoever I can get my hands on, because it takes place Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. So it's whoever's up, you know. Sometimes we have a running gag on all of my shows anyway, because I always send Scott Rosema a link to all of my shows, and he'll show up maybe 1 out of 3 or 1 out of 4. We used to say we were running bets on whether or not he was going to show up during the broadcast. So,
yeah,
but I figured
to get up.
It might you know, give people a wrong impression, like we're actually passing money around. We're not, but it's a fun running gag. Is Scott going to make it? We don't know. Anybody who's betting on Scott to show up in our last 15 minutes, guess what? You lost. That kind of thing.
I try to get up for it. It's 8 o'clock at my time, because I'm an hour ahead of you guys, or behind you
Central.
guys. Yeah. And Sunday is my one day where I don't have to start the previous night off with, hey, Siri, set my alarm for. No, not really. Oh God, she's doing it. Never mind.
You're talking to Alexa.
Yeah, she's always listening to me, and I thought I put enough pause between the words there, but no.
Need to spend the money on the Samuel L. Jackson app for that.
Oh, really?
$5 a month. To ask Alexa to have Samuel L. Jackson tell you the weather.
See, I don't have Alexa. I have Siri.
Oh, you don't? Oh, okay. Well, Alexa has that. I'm sorry.
But
I didn't realize you had.
But Siri does have this, and I'll share this with you. Hey Siri. Are you going to respond to me? Oh, let me. Maybe because I've got the YouTube thing up. Hey Siri. I see a little silhouette of a man.
Scaramouche, Scaramouche, will you do the fandango? Thunderbolt and lightning, very, very frightening me. Galileo, 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 Galileo Figaro Magnifico. I'm just a poor assistant, nobody loves me. It's just a poor assistant from a poor family. Spare it its life from this monstrosity. Easy come, easy go. Will you let me go? Bismillah. No, we will not let you go. Let it go. Bismillah. We will not let you go. Let it go. Bismillah. We will not let you go. Let me go. Will not let you go. Let me go. Never. Never let you go. Never let me go. Oh no, 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 no.
Hilarious.
Not Freddie Mercury quality, but yeah.
Still amusing, just the same. Yeah.
Still amusing. It's this year's How Much Wood Would a Woodchuck Chuck response.
Sure. Okay.
I take my amusement where I can get it, Randy.
Yeah, and on Alexa, you can ask Alexa to have Samuel L. Jackson tell you the weather. Then he'll tell you the weather, and then they tell you that the Samuel L. Jackson app is like $6 a month or whatever, $5 a month, if you want to.
I would spend it on there, because I asked what the weather was this morning, because I was getting ready to go downstairs and bring some boxes up from the garage, and I had shorts on, and she said it's 27 degrees. I'm like, oh no. And I can imagine if I'd said, hey, have Samuel Jackson tell me the weather, I'd have got, it's effing cold outside.
Pretty much, yeah. Are you crazy? You going outside?
Siri used to say brr when it was cold. She doesn't do that anymore. No. We should be more creative and more fun.
Somebody got triggered, I'm sure. So.
Yeah. Is it just me? Now, you work in the independent X section of comics. Mm-hmm. Is it just me, or are there more independents selling these days than there are the mainstream? And I know that Marvel and DC supposedly top the list, but when I go into my comic shop, I'm seeing in individual titles, I'm seeing more titles that are independent than I'm seeing that are Marvel and DC.
Well, then I have to tell you, you have an excellent comic shop in your area, because most of these guys and the shop LCS owners really are Marvel, DC, Image, maybe Dark Horse, maybe who was the other one? Boom or Scout or whatever. But then after that, good luck. But there's so much. Comics are doing what comics does. If you ever go back and look at comics history, whenever there's a roadblock that springs up in the market or in creativity in this art form, somebody goes out and finds a workaround, and the art form most of the time will grow. Now, granted, the last 30 years, we've been castrated by a distributor who did one demographic survey and decided to tell all the retailers, this is your clientele, and this is who we need to make product for. And that's all that you got for so long, except for very few stray exceptions. But now that there's crowdfunding, now that the independents are starting to be looked at more seriously, and by independents, I mean not the second tier or the third tier companies, but the fourth and fifth tier and the little individual guys. Some of your more discerning retailers, the classier ones, are starting to get more independent product in. We're almost, not quite, but almost back to where we were in the 80s before Image sprung up.
Yeah.
Where every new black and white book was always looked at back in the 80s, was always looked at as the next possible Turtles. And we had about 3 or 4 years right there in that sweet spot. That's where Arrow Comics came in. That's when a lot of these titles that come in that you don't hear about anymore. That was just after ElfQuest started raging. Cerebus was raging. Turtles come out and kick the walls open on all of the independent guys who kicked out all of this great black and white product. And granted, you had some that were derivative, but there for 3 or 4 years, there was an excellent sweet spot there where you had a lot of great diversity going on, a lot of just incredible, just a smattering of genres all over the place. Love and Rockets and Fish Police and Troll Lords and all of this were out. Just some great books. And
those
Arrow,
were almost the mainstream books that I was for me, because I was even sub-independent from there. I was reading like Wabbit Wampage and Steve Warren's Survivors series. I thought the art in there was just absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah. Southern Nights,
yes.
was out back during that time. Extraterrestrials.
The extraterrestrial time traveling thieves.
Yes. There were
aristocratic extraterrestrial time traveling.
All sorts of long titled comics because of those turtle books, but and all sorts of animals running around doing. We had Kung Fu kangaroos and Kung Fu gophers and just all sorts of stuff.
Don Chin's gerbils or hamsters.
Yeah. It's where a lot of us came from, and a lot of us got with the way the independent market went when there was a lot of abuse. There towards the end, there were a couple of companies that sprung up that were doing books just to make money instead of doing books to do comics. Samurai Santa, and there are all sorts of just ridiculously poorly done titles that these retailers all invested in, hoping that it was going to be the next Turtles because they were making money off of that. And
Olsen books were.
I didn't want to name names like Solson and Blackthorn, but we can.
Yeah, but with Solson, I had Blackthorn comics. I can't remember what they did now. Did they do Popeye reprints?
Everything they could get their hands on is what they did. And they did like a prestige format that was really nice. They reprinted a bunch of old comic strips and comic books comic book stories that they knew were in public domain or that they could get on the cheap. And that Blackthorn, most of the time, wasn't very bad, but they did a couple of really bad stuff too. Solson was mostly the one that did some really low standard books that were just we looked at that and just cringed at it. And the retailers started spending too much money into that area, and the black and whites were already starting to dwindle or phase out when Image started. Everything shifted, and it was really rough to sell a black and white book after that. And soon after that, everybody that was in the market, in the alternative market, in the independent market, except for a few exceptions, again, like ElfQuest and Cerebus and Love and Rockets, and that did it for the love of it. It went back to doing product that people had to do and had to put out and wanted to do it on their own. And there was also some great books that sprung up from that era as well that so few people realize. I just did a show, one of the Sunday morning shows, because I stopped in at a half-off book warehouse, and they had a $1 bin for comics, and if you bought 50 or more, they'd cut the price in half, 50 cents a book. And I started to go through that just out of curiosity, and I'm running across books I haven't seen in years. And I'm like, 50 cents. That's worth 50 cents. That's more than worth 50 cents. That's really cool. What's this look like? Oh, that's all. I walked out of there with like 70 comics. all at 50 cents a hit, which was a great haul, you know.
$35 for 70 comics. Yeah, I'll do that every week.
Mm-hmm. And they were, most of them were in, I would say, very good to near mint condition. Some of them were still in plastic. Some of them were still in the original bag that they were sealed in to start with.
Oh my gosh.
And their spines were impeccable. Just great, great reading stuff. I bought them to read anyway. When you get a chance to buy Star Slammers from Malibu Comics of Walt Simonson for 50 cents a hit, you know, done. Books like that, most of the continuity material, you know, but a lot of the old 80s and 90s black and white material that nobody talks about anymore. I picked up the first couple of Eagles. If you remember Eagle, the first issue of Sword of the Shuriken.
Yes, I do remember.
A couple of Troll Lords, a couple of Fish Police, you know, just great stuff. And I'm going through the whole time going, I hope there's nothing here that I did. I hope there's nothing here that I did. 50 cents. I hope there's nothing here. And I found one book that I did that I had some work in, and that was Arrow Comics, the only Arrow Comics that was there, System 7 #1, which is a superhero title that Ralph Griffith and Mark Winfrey did. I colored the back cover on that with magic markers because we couldn't find anybody to color. Normally we used, back then, Dr. Martin Dies, but they needed it done. We needed to get it to press before, you know, too long. So I sat there one evening and colored it all with magic markers so that we could take it to the printer and have it printed. So the back cover colors on that was
the job done.
Yeah, whatever it took to get the job done, pretty much.
Yeah. Yes, Mike. We in fact we just had the book up here a second ago, all in color for a dime, referencing the fact that they were 10 cents a copy, and 10 cents for a lot of pages. What a
great book. If you ever run across this and you're ever curious about comic history, there's multiple chapters. Look at how this is all eaten, dog-eared, just destroyed. But I've had it since
book.
Yeah, I've had it since 1970, and I still look through it and still use it for reference because it's got articles in here on like Popeye, the early days of comics, Batman, Shazam, or it's Captain Marvel. We all know him as Captain Marvel.
It's Captain Marvel, yes.
Let's not pull any punches here. That's always going to be my Captain Marvel. You know,
DC really should have just had the cojones to put him out as Captain Marvel first and get the trademark on that.
It's a long story. I did a 3-part video on that years ago. That's just fascinating to go in and see. It's pure example of comic book history right there. It's following that name.
Did you take in the Split Zam character? Yeah. Now that guy was making comics to make money.
Yes, he was, but he did that on purpose because he saw those trademarks lapse. Yep. And you know what he ended up doing? He sold his trademark of Captain Marvel to Marvel.
Oh.
And he took that money and he invested it back into doing black and white comic magazines. If you ever remember going into a drugstore and seeing Voodoo Tales, Weird Tales, that were like, you could tell they were like B movies compared to the Warren the Warren magazines.
Right.
That was that guy that started all that whole company. And he did it off of the $9,000 or $10,000 that Marvel paid him for his claim of the copyright to Captain Marvel.
$9,000 or $10,000.
And that's when they started the Marvel Captain Marvel.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, they didn't know if Fawcett owned the rights to the character or not. And DC back in 76 or 77, I think it was, went in and they leased the rights to do Captain Marvel from Fawcett. Now, when Fawcett stopped printing Captain Marvel, they did it because of an extremely long lawsuit that was in courts for like 3 or 4 years, that national periodicals tried to sue Fawcett to get them to stop printing Captain Marvel. And it wasn't the fact that Captain Marvel was outselling Superman, because at the time Captain Marvel Adventures was being printed twice a week, or not twice a week, twice a month, and they were selling on an average of 4 million copies an issue, right? That wasn't what got their goat. What got their goat is that they actually did a Captain Marvel serial that went through the theaters. So Captain Marvel, Billy Batson Shazam Captain Marvel, was the first live action superhero that made it to the theaters.
Really?
Before Batman, and they couldn't do Superman. DC couldn't do Superman because they had sold the rights to the Fleischer Studios, and they couldn't get them back from them fast enough in order to do a live action version of Superman. They did a couple of years later.
With Kirk
and they
Allen,
did a couple of serials then. Yeah. But Captain Marvel, and if you saw that Captain Marvel serial, there's a lot of quality to it, especially considering the budget that they did it under. But it's really a prime serial for that period, one of the best.
If you go to the YouTube channel for George Peter Gatzis, my buddy George, he's been doing movie nights. Friday and Saturday nights are movie nights. He gets all these public domains. He runs them through YouTube to find out where the catches are that YouTube's going to flag. He'll redo the music. Last Friday he just did Batman with the original serial, and he stitched it all together, and he took out the cliffhangers, so it ran like a 90-minute movie.
Okay.
But he did the Captain Marvel one, and he did the same thing. Took out all the cliffhangers and stitched it together, lovingly done. And then on top of that, he edited the sound effects for the Shazam, so it got this baritone echo every time that it was called. And the lightning, he digitized the lightning that came down, and it did the little shadow thing. And then whenever Captain Marvel would take off running, he did like they do on the CW Flash. He gave it that after image effect and just made it look like it was going faster.
Oh, that's sweet.
He really did a number on it. It hit his channel up.
Yeah.
Of course, speaking of Golden Age comics, also every Friday night, Mike Walters, who's in our chat, he's running the historical comic retrospective. He has gone back to 1937 and began moving forward, reading these Golden Age comic books with guests doing voices. It's like a read along hour.
That's cool.
We spend 2 hours reading comics and moving forward through time from the beginning.
I got a buddy who had a radio program that he did independently here in Flint, and a group of us got together and did a good dozen or so radio dramas. We did the first 3 episodes of Flash Gordon because that was available up on. The script was claimed in public domain and available online. And he put sound effects and music to it. It's pretty cool. Did a couple of Dragnets, did a lot of the Bickersons, some comedy stuff, some serious, a couple of Squeaking Door.
I know. It's not the Weird Circle. It's
not Lights Out. It was Inner Sanctum. Inner Sanctums.
Yes.
Yeah, just
welcome,
great
friends
stuff.
Of the creaking door.
Yeah. Welcome, friends. Come on in. Yeah.
I'm going to.
It's time for another tale.
We have a guest, but his lights are out.
He's performing in the dark.
We had a guest. Okay. He sometimes has a little bit of YouTube problems. We'll wait for him to come back. I was just on a panel I was just on a panel at Archon a couple of weeks ago for the old time radio stuff, and a lot of that stuff is in the public domain unless it's a trademark thing. Yeah. So I picked up this little gem.
Johnny Dollar,
Johnny Dollar anthology of stories here. Here's the man. Rob,
there he is.
Rob, hello there.
Hello.
Glad you could make it, sir. Now have you two met?
Sorry, I snuck in the back door, but yeah.
I don't think we've ever met in person, but
we have spoken in email, and I can't remember if you actually called me on the phone once or not, but but we have conversed in the past in other ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Do you guys ever work on anything together?
Arrow Comics printed an issue that Rob drew one time.
Yep.
The last
night.
The last night.
Yep. A knight who survives the Battle of Camelon. I'm not sure how that's pronounced. It's the battle where King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table are slaughtered, and he's the only surviving knight. And it was proposed as an ongoing series by Lampkin. I'm blanking on his first name.
Jeff?
But yeah.
Was it?
Yep. He was an English teacher, and now he's retired. I think he's writing books now. Last I heard, Limpkin
Graduated to real literature.
Yeah,
real literature.
Yeah.
Come on, yeah.
Real literature.
We were talking about all these books that came out in the 80s and early 90s before the image boom. And Randy, do you remember one where there was a guy who was doing a spoof on the X-Men? And yeah, I know there were like he did the X Mutants. There were a bunch of, post-apocalyptic. The world was, everybody looked like they were out of Judge Dredd. They were all just mutated and horrible and ugly. And he'd come up with a way of making them human again. Not just human, but supermodel human.
Sure.
And then he spun that off to the New Humans, and that's when I picked up like, oh, I know what he's doing. Is he going to have Human Caliber next? I don't know, but but that was a fun ongoing series of books as well.
That was Ron Lim's first work, if I remember right. I think Dave Campetti was responsible for a lot of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
You get to find out people getting their start there, getting their chops in, I guess, before they became more household names. And I'm certain, the same thing's happening now. I think a lot of these independent comics we're seeing out there, the writers and the artists, are going to be people 10, 15 years from now are going to be like mainstream creators at conventions.
Well, I think you're seeing an evolution in the art form right now.
Yeah,
I think you're going to see.
I agree.
I think you're going to see a turn away. Technically, in my mind, at least, there isn't really a mainstream as most people perceive it. If you really want to talk about the mainstream, you're talking about Shonen Jump and Scholastic.
This is true. Yeah.
Because those are the books that are out there in the mainstream. Those are the ones that, Shonen Jump still, I think, still comes out in magazine form that you can still find. Dave Pilkey, who I'd love to get an interview with just to talk to him for an hour or two about Dog Man and the Cool Cat Comic Club. If you've never seen it, you need to find one and take a look at that, because he's doing more for comics right now, more for the art form than any of us are, because he's out telling kids that not only is it okay to do comics, but here's how you do comics.
Yeah. He does comics about kids doing comics.
He does. It's about other little funny animal type characters doing comics.
But he did the Captain Underpants.
That too. Yeah. Yeah. But the whole first book of, and I wanted to say first issue, but it's really a book. The whole first book of the Cool Cat Comics Club, and I have to say that slowly or I mix the title up, is them going over comics, and the teacher of the class, she's got a comic club after school. She reads the kids' comics. And of course, these kids are doing comics. One kid does an ultraviolet comic. Another kid does comics about a talking fart. Another one does, all of this stuff. And she's freaking and going, you can't do this. This isn't, we're in school. You're supposed to be appropriate and all of this. And by the end of the book, she pretty much comes to the realization that this is an outlet. This is an emotional outlet for the kids to get their thoughts and to get their ideas down on paper. And yes, some of them are not going to be appropriate for school or for where else, but where else are you going to get this release valve out other than doing your own comics? So somewhere in the book there, he actually has a how to draw page on how to draw the poop emoji on a book that Scholastic is selling to the kids, going to the parents. I bought a copy for my granddaughter. I says, read this book, because she's been drawing anime type characters. I said, look, read this. It's important, read that. She loves Dog Man. She didn't know that the Comics Club book was out. I think there's 3 of them out by now. And I bought her the first one and says, you need to read this. It's awesome. And I told, made sure mom and dad knew what it was. But the granddaughters,
right. Yeah, I got to bring them in.
Yeah. But
and the one thing that he proves is that you don't have to be George Perez to create a comic book.
That's definitely the point. Yeah. When you look at Dog Man, I used to teach cartooning after school before the bug hit. And mostly for latchkey kids, and most of them were there to cause trouble, but some of them were there to actually learn how to cartoon. And the ones that did, one of the things they kept begging to learn to draw was Dogman. And once I looked at the character, it's like, oh, anybody could draw this character. This is awesome. Look at this. So we'd go through SpongeBob, Peppa Pig, Dogman, Finn, and the dog from Adventure
Phineas.
Time, and Phineas.
Yeah.
And Phineas and Ferb. Phineas is amazing because I always called him Dorito Head because he's got a triangle for a head.
Yeah. That's the thing. People say, "Oh, I wish I knew how to draw." I said, "Do you write your name?" It's the same skill.
Yep.
It's exactly the same skill. Can you draw a triangle? Yeah. Can you draw a cylinder? If you can draw geometric shapes, you can cartoon.
And that's how I learned to draw back when I got that book from my uncle. When I was 8, that broke down into basic shapes, cartoons, characters from the Lance Studios: Woody Woodpecker, Buzz Buzzard, Wally Walrus, Andy Panda, Homer Pigeon, all of those characters. And it showed the variety that you could get just off of changing a circle here, or here's how you make your character a girl.
I mean,
you draw
Mickey
a dress
Mouse,
on her. Here you go.
Circles.
Yeah,
it's just circles.
Yep.
I mean, even his body's a circle.
Yeah.
So,
it's a bean. His body's a bean.
With noodles, with noodles.
Noodle arms and legs. Absolutely.
And a big gloves. Yeah.
Yep.
That, if you can draw geometric shapes, you can cartoon. Absolutely.
And I used to print a newspaper locally, a comics and entertainment paper called Flint Comics. I've got a copy here, right there, that looked like that. That's our 50th issue.
Even in color. Cool.
Actually had a George. Well, there was only certain color, and most of it was black and white. But you get it printed on a wide web press, and you get your center spreads in color. But and the outer covers in color. But the majority of the rest of it was in black and white.
Yeah,
but I used
you sandwich everything else in the middle of it.
Exactly. Yep. I used to love to print Matt Fazell in here, who does Cynical Man. Because I had these kids go, all I can draw are stick figures. And I'd pull out a copy of Cynical Man and say, hey, this guy's a genius with stick figures. You don't have to draw well in order to do comics. You just have to tell a story.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. My son, he's 15 now. Yeah. My son's 15 now. And several years back, I was finding his notebooks, and I was not allowed to read them. So, of course, being dad, I read them, and he was doing his own graphic novels, but and it was his adventures with him and our cat. The cat's 6 years old now, so it was at least 5 years ago, 5.5 years ago, and it was all the adventures about how the cat wasn't wanting to be trained, and he was pooping on the carpet, and peeing on the carpet. I was like, okay, this is I get the plot of this one, and then I'd come across the pages where he would be angry with us, and he knew words that I thought he had never heard before. And I was amazed.
You'd be amazed what kids pick up.
So he was letting it out on the
sponges.
10 or 12 years ago, I found a book of handwritten poetry up in our bedroom, just sitting there. The wife picked it up, must have been reading it. I started going through and reading it. It's deep, emotional, emo poetry, and I'm like, look, who did this? She says, your daughter. Like, are you kidding me? Holy crap. Look at this. So you never know what they pick up.
Nope.
No, you don't. And it's a shame that, that was hidden, that, it was like, I'm doing this, but I don't want anybody to see it kind of thing. The kids,
was it Emily Dickinson was that way too? I mean, she was it. I'm thinking it was her that she did a lot of poetry and didn't publish it. She just did it for herself. And then somehow it got out there and started getting published. So you never know. And she's an excellent poet, of course. Everyone knows who Emily Dickinson is. But just crazy. What kids, they're afraid to put themselves out there. When they create something, it's part of them, and so they don't. They're afraid if they put it out there, they're going to lose part of themselves.
Yep.
And then when I would encourage him to do it more, he would do it less.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you really can't, because you're the parent. You really can't tell them. You can help guide them. You know, do you need drawing materials? Do you need this? Do you need, instead of like going, you need to go draw more comics, because then it becomes a chore.
Yes.
Yeah.
See, he went to a convention with me 4 years ago, and he knew I had a table set up. I was going to be selling the books.
Mhm.
He's like, well, I went into his room and he had drawn a stack of drawings of Mario and Princess Peach and the different characters. I'm like,
Sure.
he's like, I'm going to sell my art. I'm like, okay. He's like, I'm going to ask $5 a piece for these. I said, why don't you put $1 a piece on them and they'll sell faster and you'll get rid of more of them, because they were the sketches of a 12-year-old boy who was not taking art classes professionally of any kind. He made more money than I did.
Yeah.
I was like,
does not surprise me.
Be a 12-year-old cute kid who wrote books.
Does not surprise me one bit. Yeah.
He pulled in like $45.
Yeah.
There you go.
That's how it works.
Yep.
And is he still doing that sort of thing? Is he still drawing? And no,
not that I'm aware of. I mean, if he is,
that didn't encourage him. $45 didn't encourage him.
Well, the last time I saw him drawing something, it was boobs. So
hitting that age.
He had hit that age at that point. Yeah, like I said, he's 15 now, and he's more into playing the video games now. It's the traditional path of I'm going to do something that's more modern. So he's into the games. He's on his phone.
Okay.
Hopefully he'll text me during the show. He hasn't texted me yet today, so I haven't heard.
That's kind of a mindset and I mean we as an industry, as comic book people, need to try to break people up. Is getting the comics into the hands of more people. Especially more kids.
We need that next generation, and there's not a lot of stuff out there. And when I say there's not a lot of stuff out there for kids, I'm not talking about the Richie Rich and the Casper and that stuff.
Well, even that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that wouldn't appeal to today's youth anyway. I think a lot of them are seeing the manga. I think they've kind of glommed on to manga. So
the ones that want to read, and once they start reading a couple of mangas, they realize how entertaining and how just crazy the imagination level is in that in those works. They'll glom onto it. But I tell everybody, these kids are so desperate for entertainment right now, so desperate to read comics, that they're willing to read a book in reverse in order to be entertained.
Yes.
And there's
I don't know.
And that should say something. That should say something to Marvel and DC, and it doesn't.
No.
Max DeVille remembers comics. I mean,
Max.
I don't get the appeal of manga. I mean, and I've tried, and my son was watching different anime shows, and I'm like, oh, is that this character that you were like? He says, no, Dad, that character's on this other show. Like, okay, how many green-haired, spiky dude kids are there running around all these? It's the same people in all of them. It's the same girl in the Victorian dress and the big white eyes and a ponytail.
And that's like saying all rock and roll is the same and all country music is the same, because you hear 3 or 4 things in a row that's the same beat, that's the same rhythm, and you go, oh, this stuff's all alike. But not really. Do you have HBO Max?
I do.
If you have HBO Max, there is a hub in HBO Max called Studio Ghibli.
Yes.
Take a couple days out or some hours out and start watching those films, because that's anime. And each one is very different from the next. You get stuff that's as mundane as everyday life and beautifully, beautifully animated. And you get some of the most wild, most imaginative stuff in there that you'll ever see. If you haven't watched Nausicaa, if you haven't seen Spirited Away, if you haven't watched Princess Mononoke, those 3 films especially, you have no idea the range or the imagination level these books have. Yeah. It is incredible.
Well, I've seen some of them. I saw Princess Mononoke, the English dub version, because I knew that Neil Gaiman had written the script for it. I was like, oh, well, I was a big Gaiman head at the time. So I got that.
He just wrote over the original script, that's all, and converted it into English, most of it.
And I watched Death Note, the animated series.
Yeah,
and that's the one where I was like, this was done 3/4 of the way into it, and then it kept going. And I've seen My Neighbor Totoro. I've seen Kiki's Delivery Service, and I'm still like, that's the same little girl. in both those films.
It's the same studio drawing the same type of female. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
It's not necessarily the same character. It's the same look.
I know.
Yeah.
It's
a style, more or less. Yeah. And there are iconic types of characters.
Yeah.
So in order to get that particular character into the story, you have to draw it looking like this, and they have a certain type of personality. So,
but is it the story? Is it the style of the characters that makes it popular? Because if so, I've seen DC and Marvel try to do their comics in manga style to cash in on that, and it not work.
Pale imitations to some of these works.
Well, it's what I go back to all the time. It's the story.
Yeah.
It's the story.
If you haven't seen Nausicaa, take a couple hours out and watch it. It's an amazingly imaginative work. If you ever get a chance to start watching Attack on Titan animated, definitely watch it. It's a little weird. You'll sit there and you go, what's this? These guys are swinging on ropes and attacking these giant things that are attacking them that look like humans with no skin. What is this? But it's great. I mean, the entire story on it just barely scratches the surface of the actual mangas that are out, but they're still fantastic viewing. Just great properties. And it all comes back. This is all stuff that American comics, when they first started, inspired, knocked over to Japan. Japan took their culture, their kenjei, which is, lettering. Their language over there is in pictures as it is. So it's a natural blending for them to mix their language with the comics, with the tropes or the icons that we started here, and develop their own version of sequential art that they've just run rampant on. And the last time I knew, they were still printing more manga over there than they print toilet paper.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah,
because
I do know that
everybody reads them.
And everybody reads them. Yeah.
Everybody reads them.
And there's books out there for everybody. There's stories about golfing, stories about fly fishing, deeply romantic stories, hardcore sexual stories for all age ranges, and everything that you can imagine is available in manga.
Yeah, when I heard the numbers that they had for what was it, Demon Hunter, the last issue? They said like 30 million copies or 80 million copies that sold. I did a quick query on what's the population of Japan, and it was like 2/3 of the population of Japan had bought a copy of this book. Like, there are CEOs of companies who have this book in the top drawer of their desk, reading it on their lunch hour.
They're reading manga on the train on the way to work.
Yeah.
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 But you get outside of the States or outside of North America in general, Mexico is a little crazy for comics as well. Anybody who's a sequential artist anywhere else but here in Canada are treated as artists over there. These people are creators, and they're looked upon as fine artists. And so you have whole studios over there that people are, incredibly passionate about. Attack on Titan is a great example, because over here, you read it, it's really imaginative. It's a really crazy story. Over in Japan, they consider that to be one of the lesser works, because the guy isn't quite up to snuff to the quality level of some of these other guys that have produced other works, or that studio in general. Because a lot of this stuff's all done with a couple of apprentices and people,
Yeah, they usually have a studio.
Crazy.
They have a bullpen working on it. They have one person doing backgrounds, and then they're doing this series of characters. Yeah. They just have a whole bullpen of folks working on stuff.
But the thing that really sells it's the imagination level. A lot. Yeah.
And they've never had the stigma on it, because it's adults were reading it from the very beginning.
Well,
and
they didn't have a congressional inquiry into juvenile delinquency in comics, which is what essentially destroyed the American comics industry. Some jerk decided that he was going to demonize comics, and he was successful at it.
Well, I think there's a whole big, lot longer, a lot deeper story behind that ties back all the way back, I think, to Moulton and Wonder Woman, to tell you the truth. because
that sounds interesting.
when Moulton created one, there's been books written on this, and even a documentary, couple of documentaries about the secret origin of Wonder Woman. The guy who created Wonder Woman realized the power that sequential art could have, and said, I can do this, we can do that, we can do this. And he got together with a couple of his girls that they were all living in the same house, and he was very progressive. That in a I would say it's a level that we would still consider to be deviant behavior today, and was going through colleges as a psychology professor. And he had even created helped create, or at least help promote, the lie detector, which is why Wonder Woman's lasso makes people tell the truth. But he was very heavy into deviant fetish behavior. And he incorporated about everything that he possibly could of that behavior into Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
Into the strip. And he walked into the DC offices and convinced MC Gaines to let him do Wonder Woman, literally wrote his own contract that's still viable today. DC has to print a Wonder Woman comic, at least one Wonder Woman comic a year, or the property reverts back to the Moulton estate.
Oh, wow. I did not know that.
He come in as the superstar because he was doing all of this publicity about the lie detector, and he kind of was building up a name for himself, considered about the level of a high-powered carnival barker. And said, I want to create you a female superhero because there aren't any female superheroes out there right now that are going to be this popular. So if you look at Wonder Woman and the way it was created, he was pulling all of these different aspects in, the patriotic aspect, the secret identity, and all of this, the invisible plane, the fact that when she was bound together, she lost all of her powers. All of these different
by a man.
Yeah, different levels of bondage that ran through the strip. He was the sole controller of the strip while he was alive. He ended up passing of cancer like 3 or 4 years into it, and his assistants carried on for a few years after that. And then they reverted the property over to DC, and they took it from there and turned it into what it has become today. But back when it was out, when it was really popular, it was really popular because they were shipping copies overseas to the boys that were fighting in World War II. And the guys could read the book and understand what was going on. The kids were reading the book and getting a whole different meaning out of it.
Right.
But he's really attributed to starting the feminist movement because he promoted the fact that women are a powerful force and that they don't need a man out there to be binding them or to be slowing them down. And Gloria Steinem, the story goes, Gloria Steinem was so upset at Denny O'Neil for turning Wonder Woman into a Emma Peel type character at DC that she went out and promoted getting a book out of the original Peters reprints of a bunch of the original Wonder Woman stories, even wrote the foreword for it, even though she was editing
a copy of Ms. Magazine.
Yeah, she was editing Ms. Magazine. She put her on the cover on purpose because this was the most powerful female character in literature that she could think of, that everybody knew who it was. Yep. But anyway, the idea behind Wonder Woman, the philosophy behind Wonder Woman, I think Moulton explained to MC Gaines, because there wasn't too long after the war, I believe, MC sold all of his shares in national periodicals and got out, a millionaire. Sold it all. And he went out and he started educational comics. And the first book that he printed was a book that was the most reprinted comic up until 1977 when Marvel did the first Star Wars movie adaptation that Howard Chaykin did. It was the most reprinted comic of all time up until that point. And that was Picture Stories from the Bible.
Yeah.
And you can't find a copy of it. I found one. I've only seen one copy that I own that I've ever seen at a show, because it is that rare to find, because it got destroyed. Kids would buy it, they'd read it, and it would fall apart. But he did it, I think, and this is just my theory, as almost a penance, knowing that what he had started with Wonder Woman. Then he passes this knowledge on to his son, who's a teenager, gets to be in his late teens, early 20s. MC dies in a boating accident. And Bill Gaines ends up inheriting Educational Comics, which at the time, MC was also doing a few other books besides A Cow or a Girl, something, a romance, and he was trying out different formats. Bill took that idea and ran with it, and Educational Comics soon became Entertaining Comics, and Bill started doing books that he wanted to read. Hardcore horror, hardcore science fiction, hardcore crime, and all of this, and that turned into the EC line.
Right.
That when the Comic Code Authority came in and slammed them, and some of the rules.
Yeah, they were the ones that he was really after. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he was selling millions of books. He was keeping all of these titles at bi-monthly, and he was taking over the spiral racks. And he was selling millions and millions of books. Yep. So they had the guys who wanted the comics to remain as kiddie literature couldn't have that. So when they finally settled on the Code Authority, there's some rules in there that are intentionally meant to keep him and the Lev Gleason books that were raging at the time. Crime Does Not Pay was one of the biggest selling comics of all times that Lev Gleason was doing. And that was true crime stories. And we all know how true crime sells. Just look at how hot the true crime podcasts are and the true crime TV, even today. Same type of story, well, rougher, because that was during the gangster era. They glorified the gangster era and showed people that all these guys were bad guys, but they all had horrendous, violent ends to their careers. Either that or they ended up in jail. But when the Code Authority kicked in, crime couldn't be put on the cover, horror couldn't be put on the cover. They just went through and listed all of these rules that they knew was going to slam Lev Gleason and EC Comics. They targeted them. Yeah.
They were targeted. Yeah.
And the way Bill got around that is he tried a line of magazines for a while, and none of them really stuck except for the magazine about humor that he had originally started as a comic. So he stuck with that, and that was Mad Magazine. And he ran with that for decades as a magazine, as a black and white magazine that he could put out on the newsstand away from the Code Authority.
That's what Max DeVille is saying that Warren did. They put out their Vampirellas and their Eries and Creepies.
Warren,
Marvel.
Beautiful books.
Oh, phenomenal. Warren really sprung out of the stuff that Bill had been doing. He stopped doing everything else except for Mad. He concentrated on Mad and built that up. Warren went out and started Eerie, Creepy, Vampirella, and all of that. And if you look, you can see how the talent went. The EC talent went from the color books to the black and white books to the Warren books, pretty much in a straight line.
Yeah, I'd still like to find a collection of The Rook. That was one of my favorites. Whenever I could find a copy.
Wasn't that a great story?
It was just I don't know the full story because I only got like intermittent issues, but it's like he just changes places with somebody in the universe, like a castling, in chess. I'm like, I was just fascinated with that. Of course, I was also reading Panther and Vampirella.
There was a lot of stuff that Warren did that's just classic. Again, it's like the 80s black and whites that I was saying before that nobody talks about anymore. Nobody remembers. It's all just drifted off from time,
Yeah. And Marvel tried to do the same thing. They went to the magazine format, no CCA. They had these great rampaging Hulk stories.
Sure.
They had
Conan.
They had the Howard the Duck stuff that
Dracula Lives. Yeah.
Dracula Lives. Conan. Yep. The Conan. What was the Sumerian? I forget what the title
Savage Sword of Conan.
Savage Sword of Conan.
And that ran for hundreds of issues.
Yeah, that
monthly
one survived pretty well. Yeah.
Yeah. Just beautiful stuff too.
Artwork.
Yeah.
Oh,
phenomenal.
God, gorgeous stuff.
Yep.
And I'd been reading Howard the Duck, and I got the Howard the Duck magazine, and I opened turn pages, and like, oh my God, Beverly's naked. That's never happened in the comics before.
And it'll never happen again. But anyway.
No, it did not. But there she was, and not only that, but like she's plain as day sleeping with Howard, made known. I'm like, that's kind of weird.
Okay.
But
yeah, that raised some eyebrows. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, not a lot of people paid much attention to Howard. That's why he didn't last very long. Yeah. But when Steve Gerber had him and Gene Colan was drawing him back in the original comics,
gosh. Yeah,
some incredibly classically written stuff, because Steve Gerber was writing on an entirely different level than where most people think.
Yeah.
And they kicked that out in an Essentials. That's just incredible. You sit there and you read that stuff in a row and you go, Steve Gerber, what were you smoking? just some crazy imaginative, just spooferific, I guess, just phenomenal satirical stuff. But
and a lot of
again,
the stuff was,
very few people even talk about that anymore. So if you ever get a chance to see that Essentials, buy it.
I've got to look for it. I can't remember if it was Marvel Premiere. I know they had Marvel Premiere's Man God, which was, the Philip Wiley Gladiator story told in comic book format.
Yeah.
Yep. But there was one that was an anthology of science fiction stories that were just
unknown worlds of science fiction.
That was Marvel?
Yes.
Okay, that was Marvel. They did one. It was called Ecce Homo. And it was this guy in
Michael Moorcock.
Was that him?
Michael Moorcock wrote that. Yes.
Oh my gosh, that was
the third issue of that magazine has a phenomenal adaptation of Repent Harlequin Cried the TikTok Man that was written by Harlan Ellison and drawn by Alex Nino. That is just amazing sequential art, just beautifully done. Second issue has an adaptation of War Toy in it, which is about a robot soldier that George Perez drew. Again, just phenomenal stuff. Just as George was coming into Marvel. Yeah. Just beautifully done material. And again, you never see that reprinted anywhere either. All of that stuff needs to be reprinted.
Well, no, in fact, Michael Tierney is on our show regularly on the LCS Guys show. And he talks about, there was no vision for reprinting material back when they were doing this.
Yeah.
He was taking things out of his 50-cent bin that weren't selling and get like a run of 12. And he was stripping them and rebinding them because he was a journeyman printer and selling them as collections, and they couldn't stay on the shelves long enough.
Yep.
And he said, he gave it to the idea. It's like, hey, do you mind if I'm doing this with your books? And they're like, aftermarket, you can do what you want with them. We don't care. It's, we're not going to do it. Because of that, and this is, we all saw the, Alan Moore's been in the news again recently because we're all a bunch of big babies for liking superheroes. But everyone knows that, Alan Moore's kind of bitter over Watchmen because the characters were supposed to revert to him as soon as DC let the thing, as soon as it went out of print.
Right.
It's never been out of print.
It's never been out of print and never will be because it sells. But
it's here's the same thing. It's the same thing as that Wonder Woman contract, and he should have known better.
Yes, but here's the thing about
not to disparage Alan Moore because I have high respect for his work, but he should have known. He should have known DC would keep that in print if they thought they could make any money off of it whatsoever.
Oh yeah,
yeah. But here's the thing about this: because DC and Marvel too had no vision for the reprint market.
Mm-hmm.
Alan Moore is still making first print royalties off of every copy of Watchmen that sells.
Yeah.
And because at the same time, the same goes for Frank Miller. Frank Miller was the highest paid Batman writer at DC through the entire 90s and never wrote a single Batman issue in the 90s because it was all that Dark Knight and Year One trade paperback reprinting.
Yep.
So to complain that I don't get my characters back, I'm like, you can't do anything with them anyway because you finished the story and you killed off, the best ones, and you're making Jack. So your complaints ring a little hollow.
Well, he's complaining all the way to the bank.
Yes, exactly.
And he also surrendered all of his outside media rights for all of that. He's told DC that any royalties he's supposed to get for anything other than the comics goes back to the artist.
Well,
I remember reading somewhere Steve Bissett said that he walked to his mailbox one time and there was a huge check and for Constantine when Keanu Reeves did the Constantine movie that just came in out of the blue. And he had to track down, he had to call DC and ask him what it was for because he didn't think that, he should cash it unless it was really his.
Yeah.
And they said, no, Alan's given all of that to you. And he goes, all because I drew Sting in his trench coat. It was amazing.
Yes. Yeah. That was the good Constantine, though. I love that version.
Yeah.
I do remember when League of Extraordinary Gentlemen came out. The one, there was an interview, and one of the things he said was, people asked me, what do I think about, the movie? And I was like, well, what am I supposed to think about it? I mean, basically somebody came to me and said, we'd like to do a movie, and it coincidentally has the same title as the name of a book you did, and here's a bucket of money. So I was like,
Yeah.
go do what you want, and I took the money.
Yep.
But he also talked about the characters in there, and this was, I guess this was more of Moore's bitter profile coming out, because they added Dorian Gray to the cast, which he was not in the books. And he's like, what in the world can you do with Dorian Gray? You say, oh, hello, Dorian, you're looking well again today. And I was like, I think it sounds a little bit like you're jealous because you can do a hell of a lot with Dorian Gray and you didn't think to do it. Because he's the immortal man now.
More or less, yeah.
You can do a lot with that. Speaking of doing things with characters, Rob, what's this Twilight Grim thing in your?
Well, it's a vampire killer.
Oh, how tried! Come on, everybody's killing vampires. What makes them different?
Well, they should be.
True.
Yeah,
okay, you got me there.
The whole idea behind it that R.A. Jones came up with is that that vampires live on one. The city has this wall down the middle of it, and one side is the normals, and the other side is where the vampires live. And of course, the vampire side is dilapidated and it's dystopian, and the normal side is a utopian. But anytime there's any problem with the crime or anything that's out of the ordinary on the utopian side, they push the people over into the vampire side, and that's kind of how the book that I did with R.A. Jones for Silverline. That's how the book starts. Is they're shoving this young woman into the vampire side of the city, and then it just takes off from there.
And of course, they work the walls there to keep the vampires out of the good side of the city. Makes me wonder. We've got a wall. We've got a wall somewhere that's up to keep people out. Maybe we should start shoving people through it to the other side.
Yeah, it's a kind of recurring theme with R.A. Jones, because we did an issue of Scimitar way back in the day where one of the characters, Gaetano, his brother is gay, and in that universe, the United States Senate and the Congress has pushed all the gays into Baja California, and they've started their own country down there. They pushed all the gays out of the U.S. and put them down there. So it's kind of a theme with him.
But it is Baja, so it's not like they got shunted to the Mojave. They got a
and apparently they did very well, because it was from what he wrote, it was actually becoming a superpower, more or less. So, yeah, you should be careful what you wish for. Sometimes it comes back and bites you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've still got to get that Scimitar inked drawing from you.
Just describe what you want.
Similar to
the
that.
one that you lost. Was it a spouse who did away with it? Is that what it was? Or
Randy, the story was this. I met Rob at a convention.
Sounded like there was a story there. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
88, 89. I'd gone up to him and said, "Hey, draw me Scimitar." And it was he said, do you want it regular or nude? I'm like, I'll go for the nude. And I show up at the end of the con, and Rob is like tired, bags under his eyes. He's been drawing the whole time.
I've been drawing my brains out all weekend.
Yes. and he hands me this Scimitar with like a swimsuit on and everything. And I'm looking at him like, okay, cool, thanks. And he's like, what's wrong? I was like, well, you'd asked me if I wanted the nude one. I said, yes, but this is cool. Because I was, 19, 20. And he's like, I'll redraw it. Meanwhile, at the other side of the table, there's a guy holding his Scimitar going, I can't have this at home. I'm like, what's the matter? Like, I asked for one that was dressed, and this one's all nude. Rob was getting ready to draw them both over again because he was so tired. I'm like, why don't we just switch and you're done? And here we go.
Yeah, they just switched it. Yeah, after you told that story the last time we spoke, I went, I vaguely remember that, but that was a rough weekend. It had to have been.
It was. It was hot. I may have even been in my Joker costume. Um,
Oh, okay. Well, no wonder I don't recognize you then.
yeah. Well, if you remember the Joker, because no one was doing cosplay, and when the Batman movie came out, I'm like, I'm gonna be like these Star Trek people. I've got, bought a white suit and I ran it through the washing machine 70 times with Rit purple to dye it up. And I had an orange shirt, and the only thing I had official was the hat that Spencer sold, which was the Jack Nicholson hat. Did the white makeup, I found a green scarf that I tied into a kind of a tie thing.
Okay, yeah, I seem to remember that. Yeah, that's
there I was.
Of course, we're talking about the 1980s, and we're talking quite a while ago. I'm surprised any of my brain cells keep any of that anymore.
There you go.
I've got photos around of me with Dick Sprang, with me with Dick Giordano and Denny O'Neil, all in the costume. Jim Aparo. It was fun, but nobody else was dressing up.
I miss Dick Giordano. When he was essentially running DC, there was some cool stuff coming up from DC when he was there. Yep. It was definitely the high point for DC. Wow, that was cool stuff.
This kind of leads into Max's question in the chat here: is that comics rarely make money, writers and artists are rarely appreciated. Why do we keep doing it? What makes you do another one?
We're crazy.
little touched.
Well, it's it really comes down to telling stories, just like we do here in podcasting. I tell everybody that once you hold that first book in your hand, and you have to, the first book that you get, you hold in your hand, you open it up, you smell it, you even smell it, and that's when you decide at that point, I'm going to do this the rest of my life. I don't care if I make money at it or not. I'm still going to do it. Yep. And all through the 90s and 2000s and up to 2010, 12 or 15 in there, that's what we did. We had to do it. When I printed Arrow comics in black and white for a long time, and a lot of people like Rob, I was able to print and never made any money.
I never made a dime on that.
No, and neither did I. Actually, we lost money.
He sent me copies. I sold them at shows.
There you go.
I've still got some. Got some.
Okay, I was going to make sure. Anytime you need more,
because
back then, I still have a few. I don't think I have. I might not have a whole case of it, but
I think I've got a stack about.
I've got enough to match that stack at least.
Okay,
but anyway, because back then you had to order. If you ordered 3,000 copies, you got it at a decent price point.
Mm-hmm.
But even at that price point, you still had to sell 800 copies through Diamond in order to break even. Just to break. That doesn't count the ad that you ran for it or any of the shipping or anything like that. That's just on your printing costs. Well, Diamond at that point was literally dedicated to chasing off anybody in the green section that they possibly could. And we were constantly butting heads with Diamond. You didn't do this. You didn't do that. And Diamond would always come back with we can do whatever we want. You send us your solicitation. We can edit it however you want or however we want. You send us the picture of the cover. We can print it however we want, wherever we want. It's all up to us. You send us money for an ad. We can put that wherever we want, whenever we want. So we could send them an ad and hope it gets around the Arrow section and end up, back in the toy section or whatever. And that happened constantly. And there were a lot of books that Arrow was printing at the time where that was little small hits. We'd be selling 600 copies. Our break even was 800 copies. So we'd go to press with it anyway and print it anyway in the hopes that people would find it, catch a hold of it and buy more copies. And what usually happened is I ended up with cases here in the basement.
Sure. Of course, Diamond would cancel you before you had a chance to finish runs a lot of times. So
exactly. It got to the
series that never got out.
They started enforcing their minimums, and then they literally started telling us what books we could or couldn't print by what they were going to solicit for and not solicit for. And that was it for me. About 2003, 2002, somewhere in the early 2000s, decided I was not going to print comics anymore. Did a couple of graphic novels and butted heads with them again. Did a War of the Worlds collection. Tried to get them to take a collection of odd superhero stories that I had put together. And after 6 months of trying to get the rep to answer my call, because every issue of previews that come out, we'd look for it. It wasn't there. Look for it. Wasn't there. The rep finally told us they didn't want to carry the book because it was superheroes and it was in black and white. Nobody wanted to buy it. That was exactly their response.
They decided that nobody would buy it.
They decided.
Not
That's
that
exactly
they
right.
solicited it and nobody bought it. They decided nobody would buy it. That's Diamond.
That was it for me. So I got out for a few years, and then I started printing my own newspaper that I could control, that I circulated locally, sold ads in order to make money off of it. And it was rather successful for quite a few years until the Flint water crisis happened and all of our advertising dollars, excuse the pun, dried up. So
Max has a bit of a depressing follow-up on that. He's like, heard today that Wally Wood supposedly once said, if I had the chance to do it all over again, I'd cut both my hands off. And months later, he had killed himself.
Wood was rather tragic at the end.
And I think alcohol and other things were involved with that. That when you change your body chemistry like that. But yeah, if he were alive today, I think he would either be very successful, because now you can print as few or as many as you want and sell them at conventions, which is what I do on print on demand. People like Kablam, Comixology, if you want to deal with Amazon. So you could, like I said, you can print 3 or 4 copies, or you can print thousands, and you don't even have to go to Diamond anymore. Just go to conventions and sell them that way, or set up a website and sell them that way. So yeah, today it's a sea change away from what it used to be, and now I see a wave coming of a change. I'm not sure where we're going to end up. I don't think anybody can predict where we're going to end up, but we're in the middle of a big change. Digital printing on demand is and of course the internet, where you can draw anything and just slap it up on the internet. Anybody can see it. You can figure out a way to monetize it. You can do pretty well. But yeah, it's all it. The trick anymore though is marketing. How do you market it? How do you get it out there so that people know that it's there? Because there's so much CRAP out there that it gets in the way. That how do you cut through that? Somebody figures an easy way to do that, they'll make a lot of money.
Well, I tell people, so many people create a comic book, and who do they try to sell it to? They try to sell it to people who buy comic books. I'm like, they're already buying comic books. Let them know that it's there, and then you've done your job. But I'm like, if you're doing, I had one girl was doing this. The book was called Lore. Maybe you've heard of it, and it was this sex dungeon comic. The devil's running a sex dungeon. It's a trap, and there's a key and all that stuff. And she asked me, she's like, I'm not making any headway with the comic book people. I'm like, you're in the wrong area. Go talk to the people who were, having these communities about that lifestyle and say, hey, there's a comic book about this lifestyle, and you'll sell it, because they're already into the thing you're talking about, not the medium. They're into the message. So, if you find things that echo their message, so if you're writing horror comic books, go to the horror
Find
community.
out where those people get their reading material, where they get their video material. Find and try and get your book there, or or set something up online and find out where they have chat rooms. And so yeah, it's marketing now. That's what it takes.
And unfortunately, here in the States, we're facing an uphill battle when we're trying to attract a new audience to comics, because we've had a few generations go by that didn't have comics, that didn't have comics catered to them, that didn't have comics that appealed to them. So they've gone out and they found video games, they found manga, they found anywhere else, any type of other entertainment. And like I said, they're still so starved. Scholastic is now outselling the majority of the graphic novels that anybody else puts out, and Scholastic sells them to the schools, and they're aimed at a younger audience. And there's a lot of people out there that are doing that level of material out there now that are doing beautiful hardbound books that you're seeing at Sam's Club, at Walmart, at all of the big box stores outside of the retail market. And if they do give it to the retail market, then they have to deal with Diamond. And unless they're big like Scholastic, Diamond's going to give them the hardest time that you could possibly imagine, because that's not a type of product that they want to sell, even though they're charging $15 a book. And the price point on that is all up, and it's good for retailers to carry those books.
Sometimes I wonder if the reason the Scholastic books are selling in the numbers they are is it because the stories are that entertaining, or is it because Scholastic has a decades-long entrenched distribution channel?
It's multiple decades, but the thing that's selling those books is remember how Scholastic got started. Doing graphic novel work. They got started by reprinting Bone.
Yes, they did.
Which is a high quality, independent, alternative comic that got out there and got in front of a bunch of eyes. They figured out how to market that using that title. And they figured out, yes, there's not just a market here for kids through their Scholastic system to read comics, but they want to read it desperately. So then you saw, and if you look at Captain Underpants technically isn't a graphic novel, but Dave Pilkey was really happy to convert over and do his next project, Dogman, as a graphic novel. Because Scholastic was selling that. They probably mentioned to Pilkey, hey, we're selling these many copies of Bones. If you were to come up with an original property and aim it at kids and make sure, even make it look like a kid had drawn it, we'd sell the heck out of it. So boom, here comes Dogman. And now you get all sorts of stuff. Let me show you.
Kid drawn cartoons. I mean, the Wimpy Kid books are
same thing.
Another one. Yeah. And you look inside of a Dogman book, and I'm figuring that he can draw like a dozen to 20 pages of that baby a day.
I've heard that Dave Pilkey goes off and sits in a cave. I'm not, literally sits in a cave and meditates about his next book.
I wonder where he's at. He might be in Kentucky. He might be around Mammoth Cave area. Here's a copy of Cat Kid Comic Club. On purpose. On purpose. Oh. But you go and you look at that. You look at the artwork. It's about as simplistic as you can imagine. He's probably got a couple of templates done up in Photoshop or Clip Studio and just tears right through it.
Yeah, I bet.
I think the biggest time spent is in writing on the book and doing the actual book. He just everything's hand lettered. I don't even think he uses Ames lettering guide, tell you the truth. Not that any of the kids nowadays would know what that is, but anyway.
Nope. We just use Comic Sans and type it in, Randy.
I don't think that's even I don't even think that's Comic Sans.
Comic Sans. Ooh.
Yeah, really. But yeah, here he's got all of these kids still do their own comics. Here's the Underwear Wolves. Just ingenious
I am laughing
stuff.
at that.
Like I said, the majority of the creativity there is all in the writing, and the kids read that stuff and just eat it up. Doesn't matter what it looks like. Doesn't have to look like, Art Adams drew it, because that definitely doesn't look like Art Adams.
No.
But they're selling 250,000 copies every issue, minimal, of a 15-page or $15 hardcover book. And there's Barb. I ran across one, Barb the Barbarian. Yeah, Barb the Last Berserker. That was available at Sam's Club. Also in a graphic novel format.
And I talk about the simplicity of the drawings of the Dave Pilkey stuff and stuff, but they do. And on the other end of the spectrum, they've got Kazu Kabuishi, who's doing the Amulet series, and that stuff is just some exquisitely drawn artwork. So
total variety.
Yeah, variety.
That's what they're after. Yep. But how do you attract a large audience? You throw out as much variety as you possibly can. We need to figure out, we as a creative community, need to figure out how to get that into the hands of everybody. material, not necessarily aimed at kids, but just a larger base of comic book material, because these retailers are shrinking every day. There's more of these guys going away all the time. Pardon?
More Batman books will save the industry.
Well, that's that's DC's
I look at previews. I go through every month and pick out maybe 5 or 6 books to out of previews, and I go to the DC section, and here's 3 or 4 pages of Batman stuff, and I'm going,
that's
why
being generous.
are we having all these books about one character?
Because that's the only books that sell.
No, BS.
For DC.
Seriously, that's the only book they think they can sell.
Yeah.
There's a big difference.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's what the numbers are saying. So the bean counter is saying, look, out of the top 50 books, the top 10 were Batman. So obviously we want to do
those bean counters need to go back to school, because you try different stuff. You throw stuff out there and see what else might sell, rather than just retread the same stuff over and over again. Use that same character.
It's an idea that everybody knows except for those executives. I just saw a spot on Good Morning America today that had Dwayne Johnson on, pushing the Black Adam movie. And one of the things he said is, DC's got a rich library of thousands of characters, and I went through and found the one that looked like me.
Yeah. And he pushed, by the way, have you seen the videos online that got pulled like that of the post-credit Black Adam scene? And if you haven't, do you want to know what it was?
Yes.
Yes, you have seen it?
No, I haven't seen it, but yes, I would love to know what it is.
We want to hear it.
Major credits roll. They stop. Black Adam's in whatever cave it is he's in. And this hologram lights up, and it's
probably
Amanda
the same
Waller.
Cave that Dave Pilkey's in.
Possibly. But Amanda Waller lights up as a hologram, and she says, we may not be able to put you in Belle Reve, but your prison is Kandak. You can never leave that country, or we will take you down. And The Rock, says, there's nobody on this planet who can match me. And she says, we have people not from this planet. And out of the smoke, and the audience is just going freaking nuts.
Yeah.
Henry Cavill steps out in the blue Superman suit.
Cool.
And I don't even know what he's saying to The Rock, because you can't hear him over the howls of the audience that he's back. So yes, Henry Cavill Superman will appear in Black Adam at the end of the show.
Cool.
Which means, and it's which means there's more. It's not the Snyderverse, because it's not the black suit, but it looks like they're taking the better elements of the Snyder films and continuing that as a new. Yeah. In fact, I saw a review on Black Adam that said, the new DCEU is shaping up, and Black Adam's sort of like the doorway into it.
That's what they're saying. Yep.
Thanks, Rock.
I just love the idea of Pierce Brosnan being Dr. Fate. I just want to see that movie or streaming service or whatever. I'd sit through that.
Rob said, thanks, Rock. And all I can think of in my head is, what can I say except you're welcome? which is, of course, The Rock singing.
Okay.
Yeah, he sings too. The man is a triple threat.
Scary.
We were talking about Wally Wood a little bit ago, and
the big thing with Rock, though, he needs to desperately do a Doc Savage movie. He really does.
Oh, please!
Because he is definitely Doc Savage. Every time I see Jumanji, I go,
please,
that's Doc Savage right there.
Oh my gosh, please!
Just write it well, get a great cast to support him, and make millions. That's what you need to do.
In the 20s or 30s. Yeah. Don't make it modern.
Exactly.
No.
It has to be a period piece. That's the only way it works.
Yep.
But
he has to be the
perfect.
You could even take
standing on the running board of the car.
Yeah, you can even take the Fab Five and diverse them up.
Yeah,
till there's no tomorrow, and use a whole spectrum of ethnicities and cultures that he went around the world and picked the best of all of these guys, and just like you said, run it in the 20s and 30s and just have fun.
Throw him up on the 88th floor of the Empire State Building and
adapt the Man of Bronze book to start with and just go crazy with it.
Yeah,
that's all you got to do.
Fantastic.
It's right there.
Yeah. Yep.
Yes.
The big
Studio, yes.
And you talked about the bean counters who don't know about comics, and you also mentioned how Dick Giordano was, such a great presence at DC when he was there. And I've been saying this for a long time, is that the problem with comics is they're made by people who don't love comics. We don't have the Dick Giordanos or the Julie Schwartz or the Stan Lees or the Roy Thomases.
A lot of that I'm starting to think is intentional. I really am. I think there's people up there just that hate this art form, that hate the entire format of superheroes. And instead of trying to do something different and market something unique that's aimed at a different audience, they're trying to take this genre of superheroes and mold it into their image. And that's not how you make money. Not at all. You have to go out and make your own icons, make your own characters, make them unique, and figure out how to market them.
You have to fail a few times.
That's very true.
You're going to throw stuff out there that won't work, but you have to keep trying until you come up with something that does.
And you have to let it finish. The Rock is Doc Savage. James Purefoy is Solomon Kane.
Also a great movie. Great movie.
Yeah, a lot of fun. Kind of like John Carter. It was a great movie too. That just
the problem with John Carter was they called it John Carter. Mm-hmm. If they'd have called it John Carter, Warlord of Mars, 3 words would have made that movie a hit.
Or just drop John Carter altogether and put Warlord of Mars. It'd be completely different.
Could have done that too.
Well, the studio claims to be scared of the word Mars because previous books with Mars in the title failed. Well,
like Mars
the
Attacks.
Martian seemed to do okay.
Yeah,
Mars Attacks was a good hit. People loved that. It was fun.
Just sad upfront superstitions, like doing a female superhero movie took them so long to do because Catwoman didn't make it. Elektra hardly made any money. Then they just decided female superheroes can't make money, so they stopped.
Well, the bad superhero movies don't make money.
That's
male or female.
Yep.
You got to tell a good story.
Yep.
I always come back to that. You got to have a good story. And again, pointing out the graphic novels you were showing earlier, those are good stories. The art doesn't even have to be good.
Exactly.
As long as the story's good.
Yep.
The art has to at least help tell the story. It helps.
If you want to turn the page, then that's what you need.
Yeah. But you got to have a good story in order for it to finally work. That's why manga work, because they have good stories in them.
Crazy imagination level. Stories. Yep. Real creativity sitting right there. Yeah.
Yep.
And again, it's done by artists over there and people that are respected and are encouraged to use their imagination in that art form. Instead of going off and designing video games or going and doing production work for movies or whatever, that it's an honor to them to do manga and to be read by millions.
38, I called you Max earlier because your icon is very similar to the Atrocity Press icon, that it's black and white and it's small and I can barely see it on this little monitor. So I apologize for that. But he says the rise of the popularity of amateur creators on YouTube has made a lot of people realize you can still find an audience even if the quality isn't perfect. Agree or disagree with?
Agree. Agreed. It's marketing.
Okay, simple answer on that one.
Marketing and good storytelling.
And the cool thing about comics right now, if you actually look with an open mind at some of these campaigns and some of this money that's being generated, there's a lot of money out there that people are willing to spend on good old-fashioned entertainment. And like Rob says, it all comes down to the marketing. That's what you have to do. You have to be able to convince that money that your product is viable enough for them to not just buy once, but to depend on it, to come out on a regular basis. That's why you're seeing with crowdfunding, a lot of these guys are actually starting to make livings, like Brian Pulido. So it's the prime example because he's one of the ones that started out first. And he admits, I don't do a comic that's accessible for everybody. A lot of people aren't going to like my product, but I go out and I cater to the market that I know will buy my book, and I get enough people to buy the book to be able to do the next one. And then the next one gets a little profit. The next one gets a little more profit. The next one gets a little more profit. Because once you start building up that library, your dollar amount's going to keep going and growing. The more you're able to attract that audience to your campaign. So you're not just selling
and
one.
part of the trick
you
is
do
keeping
two.
the old stuff, your previous stuff in print,
Right, or
especially
available.
especially if they're hooked together.
Mhm.
If it's a series of some sort, if you can keep it available, every time you put something new out, you're going to get at least a handful of new readers who are going to
Right.
go, wait, this is part of a series? Let me
Mhm.
go back and get, so it grows.
Yeah.
It's a snowball going downhill.
Exactly.
If it's doing well, you'll gather a few new people, and they'll go back and they'll buy the previous ones. And the bigger your catalog is at that point, the more they're going to go back and get all of those.
Yep.
Because there's still a lot of completists out there who want
Yes.
everything that you've done when you do something new like that. New and
I used to be
interesting.
that one.
There's more people coming back to the comic market than are actually staying in the comic market. There's more people going, I used to read books like this back in the 90s. I want to read more of that stuff. I'm going to buy your book. And there's more people rediscovering comics all the time. And that market is huge. I don't think you're going to see anything close to the end of it for quite a while to come. And it's so easy
It's
now.
just changing. It's just
It is.
changing.
And it's so easy
it's,
now with crowdfunding for creators to make a living at it, because the money doesn't go to a corporation, it goes to the creators.
Right.
Yeah, that's pretty much what Silverline is doing.
Yeah.
Roland Mann and his Silverline stuff. I think if he can break down that wall finally and get out there where more people can see what he's doing. He's got Florida. He's got where he lives. He's gone to conventions there. If he can start branching out and get connections elsewhere, I think it'll snowball, because he's going back to trying to make comics fun again.
Yeah.
He does have superheroes, but he's got other stuff as well.
Mhm.
So
And the titles are great reads. I've got a handful of them, including Twilight Grim.
Yeah, Roland knows that you
Kalis.
have to have a story.
Right.
You have to have a good story. So
Yeah, I mentioned I was at the at the Archon convention a couple of weeks ago, and we had a panel on crowdfunding and distribution. And of course, I had the opportunity to plug my distribution company, where we fulfill crowdfunders and stuff. And walking out of that down the hall with one of the panelists, Mitch Faust, he's like, "So you do this distribution thing? I've got a friend in Florida who makes comics. His name's Roland Mann." And I had my jacket on. I had this jacket on right here, and I just said, "Oh, you mean this guy right here? this Make Mine Silverline?" He's like, "You already know him." I'm like, "Yeah, I know Roland."
That's something the last couple of years has done, especially with the advent of podcasting like this and the internet. So a lot of the folks, for so long, alternative comics were cliques, almost in just regional areas. The area around you that you could hit conventions, like Arrow Comics, is all through Michigan, a little bit of Indiana, a lot of Ohio, and just in the Midwest area. But we don't stretch out. Roland's the same thing down in Florida, all sitting there just brewing. There are all of these little pockets of great independent creators that are now starting to stretch out. Thanks to podcasts like this, people are getting to know them and know the product that they do. And you'll see the real creativity is out there in these little small publishers right now, because a lot of them, like Roland, are out there doing books that they just want to print, because that's the type of stuff they want to read as well. They want to read good, fun, entertaining stories. And there's a lot of stuff out there that's like that now. Not every book has 15 variant covers that looks better slabbed than it does on a retailer shelf. There's some really great imaginative product out there that's just crazy.
And y'all
crazy
got
good.
these teams of great people who are knowledgeable in the industry. I mean, Rob, Roland's got you. He's got RA. He's got Barb Kailberg, who was at DC for a long time. Arrow's got Arrow's going to have me. Did you know that, Randy?
No.
Yeah.
When you coming in, RJ?
December, if you want to put a date on it. Luke Stone is doing an anthology called Out of Obscurity.
Yeah.
And and I have a story in there.
Well, I'm supposed to have a story in there too. I got to take the time to sit down and write it out.
I got the artist working on it now, but I'm doing The Clock.
Awesome.
I went back to the first American masked hero in comic books.
Okay.
Which is, a load of qualifiers in front of all that to include to be first. But it's I'd love to talk about it because there's some history there that involves George Brenner having worked on Crack Comics, and if you've read Crack Comics, there's several stories in there that's by Will this guy or Will that guy, and they were all Will Eisner under different pseudonyms.
Will was
Willie
real.
or won't he?
Will was crazy prolific when he was during that period when he was on. That's why when he came back from the war, he did the spirit section, 7 pages a week for that spirit section. Most of it was himself and maybe 1 or 2 assistants, and every story in that line is just solid stuff, just solid storytelling, just great material.
He had mentioned at one point that the spirit was based on an older Golden Age hero, and of course the Clock was just a guy in a suit with a fedora hat, much like Denny. Only he took a black handkerchief with 2 holes in it. And he would tuck it up in his hat and just hung over his face. There was no clock motif for anything. He didn't wear a giant clock on his chest. He didn't sign, his cards with the bad guys with a little clock at the bottom of it. He was just the Clock.
Funny.
But his costume eventually changed to where he got rid of the no longer being Captain Napkin Face, and he put on a domino mask, and now he really looked like Denny Colt. Pre-Denny Colt. So that's kind of
a lot of pulp heroes wore the domino masks, and a fedora. So it goes back even further than that, because it goes back to those pulp characters.
It's it's an evolution. Yeah, it's a progression.
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, there's a character called the Black Bat, who is kind of the precursor to both Batman and Daredevil.
Yeah.
If you stop and examine it, the guy wore a cowl, covered his whole face. He did, on the covers of the book, he did the mask that showed this part, but inside the books, it talked about completely covering his face, and he had a scalloped cape. And he also was blind and had his eyes replaced, and then he could see in the dark. So there's his eyes got damaged by the bad guys, and so there's the Daredevil part of it, So there's everything kind of Stan Lee and Jack Kirby started grabbing everywhere and pulling stuff in from all sorts of places.
That Dr. Midnight,
Superman.
Dr. Midnight came from there.
Superman, Clark Kent, pieces. That's Doc Savage is part of that. So
I did a whole panel on that for Toastmasters of all things, because when I was laid up with a kidney stone around 2000, and so I read for the first time my paperback copy of A Princess of Mars. And I'm like, wait a minute, strange visitor from another planet, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. This is and that led me from John Carter. I went to Philip Wiley's Gladiator, and then to Doc Savage. A man named Clark who was up and away. A man of a kind of metal who had a fortress of solitude at the pole. It was all.
You just went back to the source material that Siegel and Schuster had.
So there was nothing completely original about Superman, but it was the melding of all that stuff.
Exactly.
That was like, it's like, you can have sugar and flour and cocoa, and there's several different ways you can mix that up, and it doesn't make anything good. But there's one way you can mix it all up and it comes out great. And they found the way to mix it all up.
Cookies and cake.
Exactly. So they found out how to make it without coming out as a glob, and it came out as a cookie, and everyone said, we like this cookie, and they made more.
Exactly it. Yep.
Well, guys, I don't want to keep you much longer, but if there's anything else that is pressing on your minds that you'd love to put out there, projects you're working on, things that you've discovered about comics recently that you haven't had a chance to share yet, Randy, you're probably saving them all for the Zimcast or the Sunday Funnies, but
just a few. Yeah, not a lot. Just want to tell folks there's a currently a campaign over on Indiegogo right now called Rift Writers, RIFT Writers, that Luke Stone is doing. That's an Arrow comic, and their featured tier over at that campaign is an Arrow Comics tier, where they're offering 8 32-page comics for $50. And 4 of those I've done work in or created myself or did myself. The Herobot Zero book, which is a story of a 3-foot-tall giant robot that fights giant monsters and defends his city. And Calico of Shard, which is a high fantasy book about a female cat, an elf who likes to collect things, a wizened old wizard, a female centaur, and a barbarian fairy, all trying to put their world back together again. And speaking of Superman, I've got a character out there called Paragon that I'm especially proud of. It's a modern superhero story about a superhero that just shows up one day and starts helping people. It's a lot of fun. And there's a lot of other books over there as well. Marv has Sin Killer as part of that. Rift Riders is part of that. Luke Stone's Hybrid's book, which is a superhero team series that he's got some great fun stuff available there, including a black and white anthology that has all sorts of little short stories in it called the Revolt book. And you were talking about John Carter earlier. We've got a character in the Revolt book that starts up in that Revolt book called Ginger Star, which is about a young girl that gets teleported over to a fantastic futuristic kind of a retro futuristic planet where she has to fight giant robots and strange mutants and all sorts of stuff like that. So it's a lot of fun. So that's over at the Rift Writers campaign over on Indiegogo. Other than that, I've got the Zimcast on Wednesday nights. We're moving to 10 p.m. That's a little that talks about the comics industry from a bit of an opinionated aspect. Then we have Comics by Night, which we just started over on Friday morning at 5 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we talk about the nuts and bolts of putting comics together. And that's turned out to be a real popular program because we're on so late at night, early in the morning, depending upon your time zone point of view. We're able to bring in like Glenn Fleming from England and Russ Leach from England, who's right now doing the Panini Batman series over there and just having a ball with it. It's a lot of fun. We talk about the nuts and bolts on that show. Then I have another show on Sunday morning that I love to do called Sunday Funnies, where we talk about the comics that we loved and the stuff that really inspired us to get into this business and to stay in this business, the stuff we aspire to get to or to be that really kept us reading and loving comics as kids. That's over on the Sunday Funnies, 9 a.m. on Sunday. And it's all archived.
Favorite podcasts.
Thank you so much. It's all archived over at the Indie Comics Network over on YouTube. So there's a lot of programming over there, but I only do 3 shows. There's a ton of other shows over there that cover animation. Got a couple of young kids that get drunk and review comics. Don't ask me why, but they do. And other shows like that we dispatches from outside the box, where they look for the inspiration and the things that we almost like Sunday Funnies, but it covers a wide variety of genres and a large variety of different aspects of the entertainment industry and why that inspires us to make great comics. So it's just a fun network to be associated with. I'm really happy to be there.
You're a very busy man. And you're still going to put out a graphic novel sometime.
Just a couple of shows. One of these days, I'm having a rough time with it because I'm trying to do a book about my experience over the last year.
That's the one I was talking about.
Because last October 13th, I went into I couldn't go to urgent care to get the antibiotics I wanted. They sent me to the emergency room of the hospital, where they stuck me because I thought I had hoof and mouth disease. My chest was starting to get clogged up. They stuck me in their COVID room for 8 hours before they came out to see me. And all I remember is them wheeling me out and then waking up at the around November 22nd, 23rd. and being told that I'd been on the respirator for the last 6 weeks and that I had died twice on the respirator. They thought I was gone. They brought me back twice. So, and I'm still here. And, they keep telling me you came back for a reason, and I'm laying in bed trying to get my muscles to work again, which took a few months, because when you're on that respirator, every muscle in your body atrophies. Yeah. And I'm like, well, I must be here to do comics. So as soon as I could move my hands, I asked for a pencil and some paper and just started drawing. And the first drawing I did, I drew a cartoon puppy in front of my physical therapy instructor there in the hospital, and she was stunned. Says, you shouldn't. I don't know how you were able to do that. And I said, it's hand-eye coordination and muscle memory. Here, watch, I'll do it again. And I drew a frog. So she ended up with the dog picture. But after that, I kept doing cartoons in order to get my hand-eye coordination down, even though I still couldn't touch the top of my head by the time I left the hospital and spent a couple months in a nursing home getting literally rehabilitated.
But you could draw.
I could draw. Okay. Yep. I'd sit there huddled up with holding the clipboard and drawing. Wow. So eventually I started out trying to draw happy cartoons in order to keep my spirits up. And then those eventually turned into editorial cartoons about my treatment at the hospital and at the nursing home. So I've got over 45 of those drawings on top of my other experiences. Because when I was on the respirator, I dreamt like crazy, and I could have sworn they were real, but they weren't, And it took me a couple of weeks after I woke up.
Who's to say it wasn't real? Another universe.
You might have done a Gardner Fox, man.
If it was, we turned the world inside out, and I attended Taylor Swift's wedding and spent some time with her Asian family. I'm telling you right now, it was a great time. It was good. Went to Mexico, I was anyway, I could go on all day about it, but I want to do a book about it. I'm still trying to figure out exactly what happened while I was down. And I'm, of course, nothing happens like that you don't have to deal with mentally as well. So eventually I will get that book done. I've got it. I'm working on it bit by bit, literally piece by piece, and going to put it all together. Once it's together, then I'm going to run a campaign for it, even if no matter where COVID is at that point. I still want to do the book on it because I've read a lot, learned a lot.
COVID ain't leaving anytime soon.
Taught a lot.
It's like the flu. It's here.
It's exactly like the flu. We're
going to have to live with it the rest of our lives.
Well,
yeah. I read somebody took the spike off of Omicron and stuck it onto the original COVID and made it this superbug. I'm like, yeah, why? Why did you do that?
There's a long story behind that, but you don't want the algorithms to affect any of your broadcasting. So we don't.
Why don't you take that new bug and put it into a sack of donated blood and then feed it to mosquitoes and just to see if it can be transmitted that way?
Don't give them any ideas, please.
It's a thought experiment. Go for it.
Yeah, I wouldn't wish what I went through on anybody, and I would never want to ever go through it again. But literally, like I said, every muscle in your body atrophies. That includes the bones and the muscles that control the bones in your inner ear. You're cognizant. Your brain takes a while to be able to function correctly. Your eyes, your mouth. I was under a number of therapists, but I burned through them really fast because I wanted to get back to normal. That was my big push. And I ended up leaving the nursing home within 2 months. They expected me to stay there a lot longer. And they told me when I left, they didn't know what kind of life that I was going to have. And they didn't know how far I was going to be able to wake the muscles back up when I came in, because they had never had to deal with somebody that had gone through what I had gone through before. So it was a learning experience for everybody.
Yeah. Rick Veitch has done a lot of comics on dreams. I think you'll be the first person who's done a comic on coma dreams.
Oh, you should have seen the drug list that they had me on, fentanyl and all sorts of crazy stuff. So apparently I was told that when I got hauled back there, I was putting up a fight and was quite the argumentative, grumpy old man, apparently. But I don't remember any of it. All I know is I've got a scar right there from
that you didn't have before.
That I didn't have before. I got a trach scar on my throat that I'm still dealing with, clogging up my airways, and I've got a scar on my stomach where they tube fed me for months afterwards because they weren't sure if I was going to be able to swallow correctly. And they were pumping me with all sorts of drugs and steroids too. I got over to the nursing home and I got a caseworker to actually look at my file, and she's going down the list and going, oh, holy crap, why are you on this? And it was some drug that starts with a Q that was a psychotic narcotic. It took them 2 weeks to wean me off of it. She said, nobody's supposed to be on this drug. What are you doing being on this? And I said, I don't know. She goes, you must have really put up a fight. I says, well, that could have been where I got that. So maybe I took a couple people out while they were trying to put me on the respirator. I don't know. I don't remember any.
I hope so.
I don't remember any of it. Yeah. But I got put under the, at the hospital, put under the old style protocols, which meant respirator. As soon as my lungs were clogged up enough. One of my first dreams was being suspended upside down in a black spider web, riding on a steam engine train, going out to the West Coast. And I had a nurse behind me the whole time telling me she was giving me something for something. That much I remember like it was yesterday. But apparently I was on a respirator while all that was going on. Who knows?
That book, I want to read that book.
Crazy times. Yeah.
Rob, I was going to put the Kickstarter link up for the last horror extravaganza. It's done.
It's finished up. Yeah. Twilight Grim has all 4 issues are out there now. I think there's eventually a plan to put it in a graphic novel. Maybe I'll come back and we'll talk about that when that happens.
Cool.
But right now issue 4 is out there. You can go to indieplanet.com and type in Twilight Grim, and you should be able to find all 4 issues there. If you want to know where people can see me, about every week I do a podcast for Silverline called Wednesday Wham, and obviously it's on Wednesday. Usually about the same time as this particular podcast is. It's what is it? 7 Central time. 7 Central, which would be 8 Eastern. So I'm usually there making a fool of myself every week. What I'm working on right now, I guess people watched while Randy was talking there. I've grabbed a bunch of pages here. I'm doing a graphic novel with, actually it'll be a mini series first, called Boston Bombers.
Cool.
With Ron Fortier. Part of it's set in Africa, obviously. I love it when a writer says, you know, we want you to draw the Roman Legion. I love it when the script comes in and it says, show the Legion coming over the hill, and I go, thanks a lot.
But Rob, you just draw one, then you cut and paste it in Photoshop, right?
Actually, I couldn't do that here because they're going. It wouldn't have worked. Now this group over here, there's actually in the actual comic, there's a lot more of them. Them I could copy and paste behind each other so that you got a lot more of them. But we got more Roman stuff. But it's set in the 1980s. This is kind of a precursor for it, and it's in a universe where Jesus was a woman. The Roman Empire survived, and it's essentially a female Doc Savage spinoff. It's similar to Doc Savage in that she's got her own entourage of people that work with her, and this is something that Ron actually wrote back in the 1980s for Caliber Comics. He did, the artist bugged out on him after I think the 4th or 5th issue, and he had several, and so it kind of collapsed on him, and finally he got convinced by, of all people, Harlan Ellison, who said, "What the hell happened to Boston Bombers?" Called him up on the phone and asked him what happened. So he got together with some other artists and they finished up a miniseries. And then about 5 or 6 years ago, he wanted to do a collection of those in a graphic novel format. Mm-hmm. So I got he had nicely printed copies of it. I scanned them in, cleaned them up, put them in a graphic novel, sat down and read the thing, and I went, Ron, there's more to this story, isn't there? And he goes, well, yeah, I'd like to tell more. It was meant to be a continuing. And I said, well, find an artist, I'll put it together, and we'll publish it. Well, years go by, he doesn't find an artist for it. And I'm just chomping at the bit. And I finally said, I'll draw it. And he goes, okay, I'll send you the script tomorrow. So I've been, he suckered me in. He set the hook and reeled me in. So that's what I'm working on right now. I'm up to page 13 of I believe the first issue is 32 pages. And
who's going to publish that?
I am. I'm going to put it at Kablam, and we'll sell it. We'll sell copies of it, and eventually, when we get, I think it's a 5 or 6 issue miniseries, we'll collect it in a graphic novel format, put it up on Amazon, and sell it there. Sell it at conventions, or put it up on a website and see if people buy it there. And again, it'll be available at Indie Planet, like the Silverline stuff is. So, unless somebody wants to come along and pay me a bunch of money to publish it, that would be fine too. But our plan at this point is for us to essentially self-publish it. So
you don't need a publisher anymore.
Well, you don't. You really don't. I like what Silverline is doing, which is why I'm working with him. And I'm doing some covers for them. He's talking about maybe doing. We're talking about another book that I might be doing for them while I'm working on the Boston Bombers. I'll try and squeeze that in. Plus, I've also got another thing with Ron Fortier that it's called Airship 27. It's taking pulp characters who are in the public domain. We find writers and artists who want to write new stories about them, and we. Since they're in the public domain, anybody can use them. They're set in the time period of the 20s and 30s. Yeah, there we go. Oh yeah, yep. He's out there writing stories all over the place. Airship 27, Airship 27 Hangar.com is where our catalog is. We've got over 200 books out there now. We got to the point where we had some of the writers and artists who were going, well, what if we wanted to create our own pulp characters? Would you publish those? So we've started doing new characters also. So, but I had that, and this all keeps me pretty busy. Yeah, I'm retired from the real job world, and now I'm doing this sort of stuff and having the time of my life. Taking all the skills I learned as a comic book artist and melding those into what I'm doing today. I haven't had a coma where I've imagined all these things, but I'm hooked up with a number of writers who have imaginations to come up with all that stuff for me.
Cool.
So, but I, like you, I'm having a blast doing it. This is as Picard said in one of the Star Trek episodes, or actually the first Star Trek Next Generation movie, he says, there are more years behind me than ahead of me, but I'm going to make these that I'm left with as interesting and as much fun as possible. Now, that's what you're doing too.
Oh,
right,
yeah.
Sim?
Yeah.
That's what you. Yeah, I've got all this. I've got all these skills now, and I'm going to use them.
Yep.
I'm going to use them to have some fun.
When you're lying in bed, unable to move, you start making a bucket list. This is what these are the projects that I need to get done. I've got this book first, even though it's taken me a long time to get it done. I was before this another deal came down that made me start working on Calico and Paragon. I was 40 pages into a history of comics book, a graphic novel about the history of comics, using my angry little monkey named Spank as a retailer. And going through and explaining to people the history of comics, because I don't think very many people have done it. And if they have done it, it turns out to be a really dry piece. So I'm trying to make it fun and entertaining and informative at the same time. And I was, like I said, I was about 40 pages in and had just gotten to Molten and Wonder Woman at that point.
40 pages in and just getting to there.
Just getting to Wonder Woman and World War II.
Late 30s, early 40s. Yeah.
Yep.
Wow. Yeah.
Hadn't quite got to Captain America. Hadn't quite gotten to World War II yet. But I'm going through and putting portraits of the different creators. If I can find an older picture of them that I can draw off of, and just having Spank go through and explain to everybody comics and how the comics market worked, how the history works, and I want to take it all the way through the direct market, through everything that's happened, all the way up to the point where the book's being printed, and have him explain the comics.
This is going to be a gigantic book of the first.
Oh yeah. The people I've shown it to have already told me that I should stop and break it off into 50 or 60 page volumes and sell and campaign for them individually, and then put it all together later. But it's going to be all one great big long story. I was having a ball doing it too, doing a lot of research, and that's why I got the All in Color for a Dime book handy. Is I've still got it out, and
have you found
using it as reference.
Steranko's.
Oh yeah, you should see my copy. Here, I can show you. Give me a second here to reach it.
I want to read all of these things. I'm surprised. Rob, I'm surprised you don't have
history of comics. They're all dog-eared. They're all like RJ said.
He was one of the first. He was one of the first to actually do.
He should have never
history
stopped.
Of comics like that.
He only did 2 volumes, and he should have never stopped. That and the comics book by Les Daniels, Comics: The History of Comic Books in America, is just a great reference tool. But I've got Jules Pfeiffer's Great Comic Book Heroes. But I've been a big comic book history buff for a while. So
cool.
Rob, I'm surprised you haven't worked out something called Tales from the Bus or something like that.
That would be good.
Yeah, because I drove a city bus for 20 years.
I bet you got stories that would fit real well.
Oh, I got some I can't tell.
Yeah, those are you just change the names.
Number one, nobody believe them. But yeah, it was interesting, definitely. But that is what makes this possible now. I got a retirement from that and Social Security, and I'm doing okay. So,
there you go. Yeah.
But it getting kind of pushed out of comics in the 90s, in the mid 90s when the implosion happened, and about the same time I had a couple of kids, very young kids that I had to take care of, and a mortgage to pay, and I probably could have plugged away at it for a while, but we'd have starved. So I had to find something else that had, and I got to find something that's got a pension, so I can, once I finish with this, I've got that pension, I can go do what I want to do, and I'm there.
There you go. Cool.
Cancer tried to take me out. I found out I had prostate cancer at one point. I got that taken care of. So I've even defeated cancer. So to get to this point. So
well, then like they tell me, there's a reason you're here, buddy.
That's what I'm hoping.
Yeah.
I got some things I want to do, and some other things that I have to do. You know, something's telling me there's something out there that I have to continue.
Yep.
Yeah. But
I hear you.
Yep. Plugging away, just like you.
That's what we got to do. And now, we could actually make a little bit of money doing it. So with a little bit of marketing, a little bit of luck, and as much exposure as we can get out there, we'll get it done.
I make a little bit of fun money. I have a bank account that I call my fun fund. The money from the comics or whatever goes in there. If I want some toys, some adult toys. No, not that kind of
not that kind of adult.
No, I'm talking. Okay, let's put it this way: grown-up toys, like computers and stuff that I can use to make even more comics. New tools, adult.
That's why I do the distribution thing. I mean, the distribution was just an idea off of a podcast. Guy in Australia who's like, he had a beautiful looking book. It was The Company Men. Kemosabe had that book. He's like, yeah, but the shipping is going to be outrageous, and I can't sell to the U.S., and that's the biggest market. And that's when I got the whole consolidated shipping idea, because I done IT for 35 years, and some of them were logistics companies. And now that's the one aspect of Critical Blast that's actually started making me money. once every 2 years, I'll get my $100 check from YouTube for all the ads, all the ad revenue. They don't pay you to hit it. Same with the advertising on the website. $100 demarcation. That's about once every 8-9 months. I get that. But I get a 200 order of shipment of books. Like there's a car payment. I'm like, well, that's nothing to sneeze at. And now I'm being in about 3 more days. I'm going to have 6 more boxes of these Kozor, and my podcasts are going to start out with "For the love of God, Montresor," because I will be walled in like the cask of Amontillado and have to pack my way out.
Funny.
And suddenly it's like real money and it's a real job, and I love it. I love it, every minute of it.
Good for you.
I don't have to think. Program's already written. I run their data through it, and I just sit here and say, fold, tape, tag, fold, tape, tag. I was like, why did I never get this job when I was a kid? Then I wouldn't have had to.
Yeah, youth is wasted on the young,
Sure is. Absolutely.
All right. Gentlemen, thank you
so much. All that stuff we went through made us what we are today. So all that silly stuff. Okay.
Absolutely. We had to go through it to become what we are.
Tough, cranky SOBs. That's what it is. Yeah.
Absolutely.
You kids get off my yard.
Exactly.
Studio 38, you don't have to.
That's the Zimcast on Wednesday nights. That's pretty much kids get off my lawn.
I love it.
Either
Studio
mow it,
38, you don't have to apologize. We don't exist without your questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen, thank you again for coming on. Folks in the chat, thank you for being in the audience. We don't have a show without you. We're just a
That's
podcast
right.
falling in the woods.
Yep.
And as always, while you were here, we just hope you had a blast. Good night, everybody.